Discipline is one of those things almost everyone has tried to build at some point in life. You've heard a lot about it. You know what it looks like in theory. You've probably had stretches where it actually worked, where you were consistent, focused, showing up every day, and then at some point it fell apart for actually no reason or whatever. And the frustrating thing isn't that it fell apart. It's that you couldn't quite explain why. You weren't lazier than before. Nothing dramatic happened. It just stopped, and then the cycle started again. Motivation, effort, consistency for a while, then collapse, then guilt, then starting over and continuing like this. So if that pattern sounds familiar, it's not because you lack willpower or you're not built for discipline. It's because nobody ever actually explained to you what discipline is, how it works, and why it breaks down the way it does. So that's what this video is. The first thing worth understanding is that discipline and motivation are not the same thing. And the moment you start treating them as the same thing is the moment the whole structure becomes unstable. Motivation is a feeling. It comes from excitement, from novelty, from the gap between where you are and where you want to be feeling energizing, and it's real. When motivation is there, doing hard things genuinely feels easier. The problem is that motivation is generated by the brain in response to specific conditions, and those conditions don't stay constant. The novelty fades. The excitement settles. The goal that felt urgent in January starts feeling abstract by March. And when the motivation goes, if that's what your discipline was built on, the discipline goes with it. This is why so many people's attempts at building consistency follow the same pattern. They start strong, make visible progress, and feel highly motivated. But eventually the progress slows down, the results become less obvious, and the motivation that seemed so reliable begins to fade. Then comes a difficult day. The habit gets skipped once. And because the habit was being supported mainly by motivation, that single break often turns into a longer one. The problem is not a lack of discipline or a flaw in someone's character. It's often the result of building the habit on something that was never designed to last. Motivation can help you get started, but it is rarely enough to carry you all the way through. Discipline built on motivation is like building a house on sand. It holds until the conditions change and then it doesn't. So what is discipline actually built on, if not motivation? The honest answer is identity. And this sounds like something you'd read on a motivational poster. So let me explain what it actually means in practice. Every person has a set of beliefs about who they are. Some of those beliefs are conscious, things you'd say out loud if someone asked. Most of them are not. They're just the assumptions that run underneath everything, shaping what you do without you ever really examining them. And the most powerful of those assumptions is the one you hold about what kind of person you are. The person who never misses a workout doesn't show up every day because they have more willpower than you. They show up because somewhere along the way, through enough repetition, the behavior became part of how they see themselves. Missing a session doesn't just feel inconvenient, it feels like a contradiction of who they are. The identity is doing the work that motivation used to do, except identity doesn't fluctuate with mood or circumstance the way motivation does. James Clear writes about this in Atomic Habits, the idea that every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you believe yourself to be. Small votes, individually meaningless, but accumulated over time, they build a picture. And eventually, the picture becomes a thing that pulls you forward rather than the goal. The practical implication of this is significant. It means the goal of building discipline is not to force yourself through hard things repeatedly until you've suffered enough to deserve the result. It's to take enough small, consistent actions that the identity starts to shift, that you stop being someone who is trying to be disciplined and start being someone who just is. But let me make it more specific, because identity alone doesn't explain why discipline breaks down even for people who genuinely want it and have had it before. The deeper issue is something psychologists call the intention-action gap. You intend to do the thing, you genuinely mean to do it, and then you don't. And the gap between those two things, between the intention and the action, is where most discipline actually dies. Not in dramatic moments of giving up, but in the quiet, ordinary moments where the intention was real and the action just didn't follow. What creates that gap almost every time is a decision left open. The alarm goes off, and whether you get up is still a live question. The work session starts, and whether you stay focused is still negotiable. The habit is supposed to happen, but when it should happen is still undefined. Every one of those open decisions is an opportunity for the brain to choose the easier option. And the brain, given a choice between comfortable and uncomfortable with no strong reason to pick discomfort, will pick comfortable almost every time. The solution is to make the decision in advance, not on the morning the alarm goes off, not in the moment the work becomes difficult. Before before any of that happens. Jocko Willink's whole framework around discipline comes down to this: the decision is already made. You don't wake up and decide whether to get up. That was decided yesterday. You don't sit down to work and decide whether to focus. That's already been decided. The live negotiation, with all its excuses and compromises and just this once logic, gets removed from the equation entirely. And removing it is what makes consistency feel less like a daily battle and more like just what you do. The other thing that makes discipline feel hard, and this one is rarely talked about directly, is the mismatch between the timeline of effort and the timeline of results. You put in the work today. The result doesn't come today. It might not come this week or this month. The effort and the reward are separated by a gap that the brain finds genuinely uncomfortable, because the brain is wired to respond to immediate feedback. You eat sugar, you feel good immediately, you scroll your phone, the dopamine hits immediately. You do the hard, important work, the work that actually matters, and the feedback is delayed, sometimes by months. Understanding it changes how you relate to the difficult middle stretch of any consistent effort. The period where you're putting in the work and not yet seeing the results is not evidence that something is wrong. It's the completely normal experience of being in the part of the process that comes before the compounding kicks in. Every person who has ever built anything significant went through it. The ones who made it through were not more talented or more motivated. They just understood at some level that the absence of visible results is not the same as the absence of progress. Nassim Taleb's concept of anti-fragility applies here in a very direct way. The discomfort of showing up when there is no immediate reward, continuing through long periods where progress is difficult to see, and maintaining your standards when nothing seems to be changing is often interpreted as a sign that something is wrong. But those are the conditions where discipline is built. The challenge is not weakening you. It is giving you repeated opportunities to practice doing what needs to be done without relying on motivation to carry you. Every time you continue, despite the absence of immediate results, you reinforce the habit of following through. What feels like resistance is often the training itself. So why does discipline feel so hard for most people? Because they're fighting the wrong battle. They're trying to sustain motivation instead of building identity. They're leaving decisions open that should be closed. They're interpreting the absence of immediate results as a sign that something is broken, and they're treating every collapse as a reason to start over instead of a normal part of the process that just requires returning to the practice. The person who cracks this, who stops fighting discipline as if it's a daily war against their own nature and starts building it as a slow, quiet accumulation of kept promises, doesn't become a different person overnight. But over months, over a year, over the kind of time that real change actually takes, they become someone who looks at the hard thing and does it. That's the whole explanation. And now that you have it, the next question is the only one that actually matters. What are you going to do with it today? This was my first video on this channel, and I hope it gave you something valuable to think about. If you'd like to see more content like this, I'd be glad to have you along for the journey by subscribing to this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.